back to the monkey cave, and here we are finishing up this Sport Trac project. So, in the last episode, I was pretty far into the suspension, doing some metal work. Then over the last few days, I've done the final assembly, talking about things like putting anti-seize on your bolts, so on and so forth. Well, in this episode, I got another little tech trick. I'm going to show you how to properly shank your bolts and what that actually means by shanking your bolts. And then I have another little tech trick that I'm going to include in this segment, and that is a little bit about putting heat shrink on your hose clamps. So come on. I had a little issue with audio on a bunch of footage I shot for this episode. So what I'm going to try and do is maybe if I have to do some voiceover or a little bit of editing and get tricky with it, that's what I'm going to do. So come on, I'm just going to play some music and we're going to get into this build, you guys. So on final assembly, you'll see me go through, and obviously I'm doing a nut and bolt check, but I'm also taking my time to route the hydraulic lines, aka the brake lines, securely affixed to the upper arm. Sometimes I'll run them down. I always get them a little extra long so that I can route them accordingly. I don't want just like a single zip tie holding them in place, period. On this particular truck, I actually welded tabs underneath to zip tie that brake line too, so that it's securely fastened. And then you'll see me drop the truck down and turn the wheels left to right. I'm obviously checking for clearances. The last thing you want to do is make a left turn or a right turn and your brake line gets ripped out, or you lose hydraulic pressure. So obviously checking back and forth. Make sure that everything clears top to bottom. With the coil over in there, I can't do that at this current time, but I have already clearanced everything on the bump. guys, so while I'm in the process of assembling the Sport Trac front end, there's a couple small details that I wanted to share with you guys because I feel like they're actually really important. Okay, and one of those is bolts and how they work. Because you're dealing in suspension, it truly is life or death, because if a component fails because the fabricator didn't do his job or any of that, it could get quite dangerous. So there are a few things that I would like to share with you guys that us in the off-road industry as professionals try to address when we find it. Obviously this truck has been around for a long time. It's worked great, so I'm not trying to talk about anybody else's deficiencies in their work or any of that, but one thing that I found was a handful of bolts that were not shanked. Okay, and so by shanked, what we mean is description of a bolt. You have the head, all right? You have the shank, which is the entire portion from here to here, and then you have the shoulder. The shoulder goes to where the threads begin. And that point right there is below the diameter that the size of the bolt is. So that is the weakest part of a bolt. And a lot of times these are standardized sizes. So if you're assembling a set of tabs with a uniball in it or a bearing of some sort or a bushing, you tend to use even numbers as well. And what happens is when you go to assemble it, that shoulder right there terminates right on the inside of the tab. I've got a video here I'll show you. Okay, and that is the weakest spot, and I've seen bolts fail right there and break. So what I want to do is I want to share with you guys what we do in the off-road industry. And what I do is I buy long bolts, right? And when I take those bolts, okay, I fit them between my tabs. Also got another video here. Okay, and then once I've done that, okay, I will take the nut that I'm going to use along with the washers so that I have the exact length I need. I will mark my bolt. I'm going to show you right now, and I'll cut the excess threads off. I don't need them. Try not to cut them too short though. And this is how we do that. All right, you guys. So another thing to take into consideration is the grade of bolt you're going to be using, right? And the nuts that you're going to be using. So obviously to figure out what grade of bolt you got, you're going to count the lines on the head right here and then add 2. So this has 6 lines. Plus 2 makes it a grade 8 bolt. And then you have grade 10 as the next level up. A lot of people buy them as an F911 bolt. You can do that, so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to cut those in a second, but I also want to share with you the type of nuts that there are that we use in this industry. And for automotive applications, because you have high vibration in there, okay, you want to make sure that you use a locking nut. Okay, not just a lock washer. Those have no business in this particular application when it comes to automotive. Because once a lock washer comes loose, it does absolutely nothing. Okay, if a nylock or a stover nut, that's the other type that we're going to deal with here, comes loose, it will continue to have friction if it's working its way off, gives you time to repair it. Usually from the driver's seat, you're going to feel something loose in your vehicle, so on and so forth. But standard nuts have no business in this industry, and you should not be using them, okay? So if you don't understand what a stover nut is, a stover nut is this, okay? And what it is if you look really close, the manufacturer has crushed it. So it's actually an oval at the end right there rather than a perfect circle. And that's what actually engages the threads and locks them into place. Now these tend to have a much more firm grasp, all right? And they will stay tight for longer than nylocks. Nylocks, if you use them more than once, they start to get a little bit looser. Now they're still a great nut, okay? Don't get me wrong, but application specific, as well as a stover nut is a little bit narrower. So the profile this direction is a little narrower when you have tight, compact spaces. They're great in there. Okay, so as you can see here, right, my stover nut is silver, but that is a grade 8. Okay, otherwise, golden color, silver in color, those are gonna be quick identifiers, basically. All right, so you guys, this is how we do this, right? I prefer a machinist vise because it has a low jaw profile, and some places it's great, some places it's not. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock my bolt into place, all right, and say I've already fit it and I would have already marked my threads where I want them. All right, But you can use whichever washer you like. I got thick ones and thin ones. You want to make it fit, like I said, so the shank goes all the way through. So you're going to end up doing something like that. You want to fit it, and then you can cut it in any way you like, okay? But obviously, you're looking for something that cuts nice and clean. I happen to have this little miniature bandsaw. It actually works great for this, right? So, you want to cut the threads off nice and straight. All right, and then you'll end up with something like this. All right, then of course I'm gonna bring this bolt over to one of the abrasives, and all I'm gonna do is just kind of lightly grind off the edges. I don't need to take a whole lot off. It will engage the thread, okay? So, at about a 25-degree angle. And you really don't want to take too much off. And then of course, obviously, you want to check thread engagement. And if you grinded it okay, it should go right together. And you'll want to check that before you actually go install it in the truck. All right, you guys, so another little tech trick I wanted to show you as we complete this Sport Trac is basically putting heat shrink on your hose clamps. Anytime you're gonna mount your reservoirs from your high-end shocks, you know, like each shock could be $1,000 or $500, $600. You want to take care of the shocks and the components. You want to protect them during the fabrication and installation processes, right? But also because the reservoir might be made of a different metal than the roll cage tubing or the actual like clamps that you weld in place to clamp that reservoir to. So one of the tricks that we do at the higher end is take a little bit of heat shrink. All right, so I've got some 3M 1/2-inch ID heat shrink right here. Okay, but even Harbor Freight sells little packs like this, and they're dirt cheap. You can buy it, and they have a bunch of different sizes that are actually useful for other things. But 1/2-inch or 3/8 are usually the two sizes that you can use for the standard hose clamps that we do. And it's not too hard, okay? Obviously, you want to put it together, right? And then you take the hose clamp and you just kind of fit it around, all right? And this piece is a little too long. So you figure out where you want to trim it. Obviously, if you want to assemble it and mark the hose clamp, you will know. But generally, it's not too bad. Okay, so now that I've cut my heat shrink to size, then I'm going to take the hose clamp, take it apart. I don't mind straightening them out a little bit. It makes this slide on a little easier. All right, because once you put them together and cycle them through, you're good to go. Now, I've got heat shrink on here. I can put this together just a little bit. All right, take your little propane torch, your MAP gas, whatever you want. All right, and just come down on it and shrink it on a little bit. I'll flip it over and shrink the other side. All right, and right after you do that, it's going to be a little bit hot, but you can generally pick them up and you can put them right into place. And that right there can help eliminate electrolysis by the reservoir being possibly a different material. Some are aluminum, some are steel. So you want to minimize that, but it also is clean. It'll keep any corrosion and things like that from happening on the reservoir. And it's just a touch of class.